And we are live.
I'm really happy. I go to the dentist twice a year.
Okay. What happened this time?
Oh, just I like my teeth.
Yeah. The dentist for me at this moment is like a grade. Like when I go to the dentist, I get my teeth cleaned twice a year. And the woman, it's sort of like I have my mouth open and then I'm waiting to see like, how did I do? It happens all the time. Like I had the gum disease a few years back and they had to do a total scraping. And if you've ever had your gum scraped, like you don't want to have that done a second time. So I totally, I go there with a big smile on my face and wanting to see when I'm graded this time around.
She was going to give me
by the way, we haven't introduced the show yet.
She was going to give me a very shallow filling.
Really?
Yeah. And because she saw that I arrived in a tank top, she's like, "Oh, you're not cold. You can handle it without the anesthesia." I'm like, "Of course, let's do it."
Wow. You've got food in your mouth, by the way.
You're joking.
No, I'm not. Right there. I'm not putting my finger in your mouth. We are on the show today with Daniel Bruce Levin, and he has a book, I think at least one book, and that's called The Mosaic. But we're not necessarily going to talk to him about that to begin with. We're going to discuss with him the journey he's had with his 31-year-old daughter who he's never actually spoken with. And she has what has been categorized as mild mental retardation or some
30
word.
years ago.
30 years ago. I don't even know if we're allowed to use that language anymore nowadays because of whatever the offense.
Where are we going to do this, Andy?
We are doing that on a wonderful chaos
On a
Bambus.
wonderful chaos, Andy.
And we like it that way. I got it. I got it. You want to see what was in your mouth? Bambus? It's on the tip of the pen.
No shame. Great.
We had the rule that we needed to do a teeth check before each show because I think one of us went through a show. Oh, it's still there. Actually, didn't get it out.
You know what? We're going to Photoshop it.
Yes. So when I got Bruce, getting back to Bruce, when I got him on, I have often, when we talk to someone, I don't want to talk to them in any degree of authority. So I'm always looking for the person and then the idea that would feel like it would be really nice and interesting to speak for an hour around that.
Yeah.
And it was really easy to engage him. And we had a quick talk and we both agreed that this would be a topic that he could run with and he'd be interested in sharing. And it lends itself to so many other topics that we've done, surrendering and allowing yourself to feel helpless in a situation and yet still see there's things you can do.
Yeah.
I also think it's kind of interesting because I have an association with nonverbal communication where I feel that a lot more is communicated non-verbally than verbally most of the time. So the idea that we actually need a language is just because we haven't tried it any other way.
Yeah.
And of course there's nuances and there's, refinements, but core energy, like if someone walks in a room, you can tell if they're in a bad mood or not. You don't need to say, what mood are you in?
Yeah, but also you've also been to the authentic relating workshops where people have shared silence, and in the silence, people get to know more. They get so much information. That's because they heighten their senses and alertness.
Yeah, and people are so unaware of how much they reveal.
Yeah.
Like they're so unaware. I remember when I'm with Ronnie, because Ronnie is Indonesian, my wife's Indonesian, and when I go to visit her family, they'll talk, and I'll understand, say 70% of what they're saying.
You still married to this guy?
They don't understand it. So then the mom will always say, does he speak Indonesian? And I mean, it's like the intuition that, this is 60 to 70% of the time, they're always talking about this subject. You'll understand one word and then you can infer the meaning of or whatever has been spoken around it. It's not all that difficult, right? Especially if I've been out of the US now for some odd years. But so yeah, that is exactly what I'm looking forward to discussing with Daniel.
Nice.
B. Levin. and he looks a bit like Santa Claus. He studied 10 years to become a rabbi.
No,
So
he looks like Gandalf.
So he's gonna have very clever things. One thing I've learned about anyone who studied to be rabbi, there's always like clever little short statements that are like Occam's razor, like the least thing you can say that has the most amount of power to it. So we'll see how much he fulfills that stereotype for us.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Andy, 3 more shows to go.
3 more shows, and then we're taking a break.
This is 2 more shows.
2 more shows to go. Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
It's going good. You want to do a teeth check before we start?
I got my teeth taken care of. I was so embarrassed for you guys that I just ran to the bathroom real quickly.
Yeah, there's no shame on this show, unfortunately.
No shame. That's good. So I think we have to end right now because I don't know that I can live up to these short, pithy statements that you got me saying here.
Well, from 10 years of studying to be a rabbi, what would be the thing that you'd say the greatest insight or wisdom that you took away from that?
To leave.
To leave.
To leave. Being a rabbi.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. I could see that.
This morning, I knew this show was going to come up, and I was, without knowing anything about your book, I didn't do any research about you, but I was just tuning into what it would be like to have a child that doesn't communicate, doesn't give any sign of validation.
Yeah.
And for 30 years, I'm like, wow, it's just a constant giving of love, just a constant giving, and you never know if there's something coming back, but you're just giving. That's all. Like,
so let me clarify, because it's not quite as extreme as you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
But she could never have a conversation like we're having right now.
Okay.
So, and yet the challenge for me was in understanding her and finding a way to understand her without words. And if I can, I'll start with a story. Is that okay with you guys?
Please.
So this person's the closest person I have in my life. This person is the one that I love more than anybody that I've ever loved. And to have a child, when I was so you asked me what my lesson was in the seminary. I remember a friend of mine saying to me, I thought I knew what love was when I got married. But I had no idea what love was until I had a child. And I thought at the time when he said it, I wasn't married and I didn't have a child. I thought that's really too bad, because here's this beautiful, loving relationship you have with a partner. And you would think, why would you think that that's not love, that having a child is love? But I understood it after I had a child. And when my daughter was born, from the first moment she was born, I was holding her in my arms and welcoming her into this world. And I heard her speak as clearly as I'm hearing you speak but she wasn't speaking with words. I heard her say, "This is not my place. I made a mistake. I got to get out of here." And so I was just streaming tears, and all my friends thought, "Oh, isn't this beautiful? He's feeling how emotionally, he is with it." But I realized this human being didn't want to be here because she misinterpreted how long it would take, how everything slowed down from the perception she had wherever she was of coming into this world, thinking, "Wow, that's not bad. I'll go. It's just going to take that much. I'll take all this on for me this time." But when she got here, everything slowed down, and she went, "Whoa, I made a mistake. I got to get out of here." And she tried for the first part of her life to get out by getting sick, by getting, all these things happening. And the name I gave her in Judaism was Elisa Haya Levin. Elisa is the joy, Haya is life, and Levin were the servants in the temple. So I said to her, "I want to show you the beauty of being here in life, serving God, doing whatever you have to do, just being here and serving God." Fast forward to about the time when she was 9 or 10 years old. The frustration of not being able to be understood was so great that I started to notice a pattern that developed with her. The pattern was she would speak, And when I didn't understand her, which I understood her a lot because we were so close that, like you were saying in the introduction, somehow we have a way of hearing things that people don't say because we just know we know even a little bit. It's like a foreign language. If you know even one or two words, you got an idea of what's going on and you can build it out. And then you just feel people. And I could feel most of what she was saying. But there were a lot of times that I didn't. And when I didn't, she would raise her voice. And to her credit, she sees that I'm getting to be an old man and maybe my hearing is going. And so she thought if I scream it, maybe he'll hear me. And to her credit, every once in a while, when she would scream it, the way she pronounced her words was different. And I did pick up something, but not most of the time. Most of the time, she was now screaming something that I couldn't understand. And it was just escalating. When she would scream and then I didn't understand her, then she would go into tantrum. And she just got so frustrated that the tantrum now was no longer really about trying to communicate what she was trying to say as much as just trying to say, here I am, why don't you see me? Why can't you hear me? And when the tantrum couldn't communicate what she wanted to do, she would run to me and try and attack me. She would try and rip my shirt or bite me. Now, I'm a fairly sensitive guy. I feel like I've spent a lot of my life trying to see what people don't see and hear what things people don't hear. But this took me 15 years to figure out. Because when I say it to you now in the story that I'm saying, it seems all, okay, great. She speaks, she screams, she tantrums. It's very obvious. Her time frames are extended. So she can speak about it, then scream about it hours later, then tantrum about it days later, and attack weeks later. Or it can all happen all at the same time. So it wasn't quite as obvious as it was as I'm saying it. Finally,
if I may, when she's trying to communicate to you, are you wording back what you understand to see if she gets it? Or how does it work in that direction? Like, is it you just act? Is she like, I want to go to McDonald's, and as long as you don't go to McDonald's, she's angry? Or is it like, can you say McDonald's and then she says, oh yeah? Is it like that or no?
She can't even get the word McDonald's out. Yeah. So to understand that if she wants to go to McDonald's, which we don't do most of the time, sure. but to understand the word McDonald's takes a lot of understanding. You have to understand, first of all, she's hungry. Second of all, she doesn't want to eat what I'm giving her. Third of all, she wants to go out somewhere. But it's not like someone can say to you, I want to go to McDonald's or I want hamburger. It could be in the middle of sitting trying to go to the bathroom and her not being able to go to the bathroom that she'll start screaming McDonald's, bah, 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 bah. But you don't really understand what the hell it's in relationship to. Or I didn't, at least.
Yeah.
So this went on for about 15 years. And sometimes her episodes would happen 5, 6, 10 times a day. And so most of my hair turned white over the course of that period of time. I was black hair, black beard.
But just to go to that moment in time, how was it for you? Like, what happened in you? Like, could you in any way ground the energy, or were you like verging on a heart attack? Like, where were you?
No, I was never verging on a heart attack. I was just so sad that I couldn't understand her. Like I had very little concern about me at that point in time. All I really wanted to do is let her know that I loved her. I wanted the best for her. I wanted to understand her. But she knew that. I mean, she knows that. I mean, she'll now say something like, just me and my dad, or something like that, because she just knows that how much we feel for each other. But what happened for me, which was really changed my life and changed my relationship with my daughter, was in the midst of one time where she was running at me in rage. And she was coming to try to bite me or rip my shirt. And this has gone on for 15 years. And finally, I looked at her. I just sat there without any fear, without any sort of, opposition. And I said, Elisa, we can't do this anymore. You know that. I love you. You know that more than I love you more than anything in the whole world. I want to understand you more than anything in the whole world. Will you be kind enough to just tell me what you're trying to say without words? I just can't understand your words. She stopped midstream in her attack. Her rage in her face went to a smile that was from the core of her being. And she looked at me in perfect English, said, "I am Daddy." And I said, "Pardon me. What the heck are you talking about? What do you mean you are Daddy? For 15 years, you've been talking to me without words and I haven't understood? Are you putting thoughts into my head?" And she started laughing, this uncontrollable, contagious laugh. And we laughed for about 15 or 20 minutes together, with the relief that finally she had found a way to communicate to me after 24 or 5 years of trying. And this is the crazy thing. I knew that that's what was happening. I didn't trust it, but I could hear her speaking to me inside my head. I just didn't even know, because she couldn't speak, I didn't know how capable she was of thinking. So I wasn't even sure that she could say the things that she was saying that I was hearing she was saying. I just thought I was imagining it. Here's the amazing thing. From that moment on, she's never screamed, she's never tantrumed, she's never attacked again. If that would have been the end of the story, I would have been in bliss. Like, now I have a way to hear my daughter. I can talk to her. She can communicate back to me telepathically. It doesn't happen all the time, but around something that's important, it happens. It never gets her to the place of rage anymore. But I got greedy. I said, I wonder if my daughter's really any different than anybody else in the world. Because what I watched when I looked out into the world was, when people speak and they don't get heard, they yell. When they yell and they don't get heard, they create chaos. Not chaos like you have on your show, but sort of rage, and they go out of control.
Fight or flight, yeah.
When they go out of control and it doesn't work, then they start to attack. They'll blow up a building, they'll shoot people in a square, they'll ruin a reputation, they'll end a marriage, they'll close down a business, they'll do whatever they can do. So I wondered if I could take my 31-year-old developmentally delayed daughter's theory into boardrooms, into government, into hospitals, into prisons, and see what would happen. And what was amazing is, everything is speaking to us if we would just listen to it. We just don't know how to listen. And that one incident got me involved. That incident, writing the Mosaic, and a homeless guy in San Diego, set me on my new purpose, which was to create a revolution of listening. It's not that people aren't speaking. It's that we don't know how to listen to them, what they're saying. And that's as easy as a conversation with people that are verbal around the dining room table. That's as easy as sitting in a boardroom. That's as easy as a political conversation that happens. I mean, look at the politics in America. Nobody's listening to each other.
No.
And if we don't listen to each other, we'll never hear what they're saying. And as long as we can't hear what anybody's saying, we stay in the same silo that we've always been, of people who think like us, feel like us, talk like us. But that's not where innovation comes from. That moment where she told me, "I am Daddy," was an innovative moment that changed our life, because it got us to see another way of hearing that we hadn't heard before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes all the sense in the world to us. We spend a lot of time discussing this on the show. In fact, I lived in Japan some years, and there's a word they use, Ishin Denshin, which is the ability to communicate without words. And what I didn't know, I learned Japanese, and it's funny because you can learn a language and still have no idea how to speak it, because the things there are far more culturally embedded than they are through the words. So what I found, and I've talked about it quite often on this show, is that there is a way of sensing and understanding that's far deeper without the words, which is obviously why Japanese films don't have a lot of words, because it's also obviously part of their culture. But yeah, if there's anything that I've sort of graduated to, I would almost say 15 years ago, is if I'm talking, then there's still some confusion. And so if I have a question, then the question is either out of wonder or out of supporting another person, but then I'll ask them if it's okay to ask, because sometimes people don't even want to do any development and they shouldn't be imposed upon.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I wouldn't take it to the extreme that you're taking it. I would just say we have all these incredible resources to choose from. And clearly, when you're good at language, you express yourself and communicate, and people understand what you're saying. And what a beautiful thing. But even in writing my book, The Mosaic, the message came to me, which was really interesting, that the story is a beautiful story. But the space between the words is what's more important. And I don't think I really understood that for a long time. I'm just starting to understand it now. That it isn't, we can only say so much with the words that we say. It's the feeling and the vibration and the resonance and the tone and just the presence that you feel in a person's presence. Like you said it when you started out the show, there's some people that walk into a room and immediately people are magnetically drawn to them. Sometimes that's just because of how they look, and then they'll go up to them and they'll start to talk with them, and you see the drove of people running from them because there's nothing there once they see once they get beyond the looks. But sometimes the way people look and the way they speak is magnetic, and people are drawn. But I've been in rooms where the weirdest, most awkward, ugliest people have walked into the room, and everybody shunned them until one or two people started to be with them, and then the group came around them. And people couldn't resist being with them because there was something that they had that was far more than what you could see or hear or feel. You just felt something in their presence. And what my daughter taught me, what the Mosaic taught me, what my friend who's homeless in San Diego taught me, is that nothing is as it seems. Nothing is the way we think it is. And if we were just open to allowing it to tell us what it wants us to do, if we're open to just listening to our businesses, to our environment, to our relationships, just to the very things that happen in our life, everything's trying to communicate to us if we'll listen to it.
Yeah. Not much to follow up from there. It's kind of, once you've channeled that part of yourself, then you begin to look at your environment without trying to understand it, but let almost the wonder of it speak to you. And I think it's there's the words of explanation, and then there's the experience of it. And oftentimes those two things are very different. So even understanding it might give the impression that one could get it, but you get it when it's almost your brain has to go quiet. I found that when I'm doing my own work, if I'm not quiet in my brain, I know that I'm not really hearing what's going on around me, and I have to get clean in myself before. It's almost like my sensors need to be polished so that I can process the world.
I love that, and that takes so much courage to do. And most of us, but what I found in the work that I do with people is so many of us are scared of that quiet, empty place because we think quiet is empty, but quiet isn't empty. Sometimes when we know how to listen to the quiet, the sound is resounding. Yeah. But when we don't know how to listen to the quiet, it just feels like, oh my God, what do I do here? I'm scared. I don't have noise around me. Yeah. I remember in my life, I've had a tremendous life. And I don't mean that in the way most people will understand it. I've had incredible highs and tumultuous lows. In losing my parents when I was a kid, I realized when I wrote The Mosaic that part of what I was doing was I asked the adults where my parents went, and they told me they went to a place called heaven. And so most of my life has been a search for that place called heaven, because I wanted to know that unconditional love that I felt with my mom and dad. And if you have kids, you know that feeling. Like I know that feeling with my daughter. There's nothing she could do that would make me not love her. Yeah. With most people, it's a learned love. With kids, it's instinctual. And I wanted that feeling that my mom and dad had, and I didn't feel it from anybody. People were kind and loving to me and gentle and good, and they were always considered. I was the type of person that people liked from the start. I wasn't, I was always very lucky that way. But I had amazing opportunities. I had an opportunity to run a multi-billion-dollar company that I walked away from because it wasn't my heaven. Mm-hmm. I had the opportunity to start organizational psychology with the man who started organizational psychology. He said, psychology has been for people, individuals. I think organizations could benefit from it. And I looked at him, and I had hair down to my waist, and I said, Lou, do you really think I'm an organizational guy? I mean, I don't relate to that at all. But I was so short-sighted because 30 years later, I was working in organizations. Hmm. Right. So we think we know so much, but we don't listen to the things that we think we know better. And I think, I don't know about we. Let me talk about me, because I know about me. Without being narcissistic, I don't want to project myself onto anybody else. I had amazing opportunities, but what I realized is they were not the heaven that I was looking for. Mm. And it was only in writing the Mosaic that I realized that heaven for me was a perceptual shift. It wasn't a place. It wasn't a guy with a better beard than mine who looked better and was wiser. It was a perceptual shift where the things that I looked at and I saw exactly the way I saw them suddenly in one moment shifted. Yeah. And I saw them differently. That for me was the heaven that I was looking for. I'll have some of whatever you're drinking too, by the way.
Bambos always brings tea for us.
Okay.
No alcohol.
Okay.
The perceptual shift. It's interesting because when people talk about, enlightenment type of experiences, they always at the end laugh and say, actually, if I knew it was this, I don't know if I would have built it up so big.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always get a bit, we've done our own show on enlightenment and the whole idea of projection and creating this confusion. So I just want to stick with the simplicity of, at some point, things get twisted on their head and they make more sense. And trying to share with another what that might mean is very hard for them to understand because they're still living in the other paradigm where it is, I'm taking all of this way too seriously, sort of thing. Yeah.
So the example that I use, I really like, and it's such a simple example. If you've seen the picture, you know what I'm talking about instantly. It's a black and white drawing of where if you look at it one way, it looks like an old hag.
Yeah.
If you look at it the other way, it looks like a young socialite. Mm-hmm. Well, the amazing thing about that picture is both images are in the same picture you're looking at, but you can only see one at a time.
Yeah.
And it takes a perceptual shift when you see, when I first looked at it, I saw the old woman. And my friend said to me, well, what else do you see in there? I said, what are you talking about? Come on. They said, do you see the young, beautiful lady? I said, come on, you just want to make an old woman young and beautiful. I mean, I appreciate your kindness of spirit, but that's an old hag. She doesn't look young and beautiful. Mm-hmm. They said, no, you don't see what I'm seeing. I said, what? You can't have a young woman and an old woman in the same picture. They said, look again. That picture to me represents the life we live. Because we're so set on seeing the world that we see that it literally blocks us from seeing what else is there. And so one of the practices that I would invite you people in your audience to do, which is cooperate with me in my practice of it, is how do we slide ourselves out of the way to allow ourselves to get out of the vision of what we see? Because we don't see the world that is, we see the world we see that is. Mm-hmm. What would happen if we saw the world the way it really was? What would we see? In my book, one of the characters that I love talking about is the mirror maker. Mo is on the search to find heaven. And it's a long journey. He starts as a little boy, and by the time the book ends, he's an older man. And he's walking and meeting all these different characters, and they're not the clergy and the wise people. They're common, ordinary people. They're the street artist and the blind woman and the homeless guy in the street. And he walks into a shop. This shop is a shop of mirrors, and he meets the mirror maker. And so his journey has been a lot of time just by himself. And all of a sudden he looks up and he sees this town on a hill and he says, oh my God, if I hurry, I can get there before. I haven't been with anybody. I haven't seen people in weeks now. So I want to just see somebody. And he races up to the village. And by the time he gets there, the village is shut down except for one shop. And he thinks, okay, I'll walk into the shop and see who's here. And he walks in and the door is open, but nobody's in the store. And he thinks, oh, my bad luck. I just wanted to be with somebody, but the door is open. Someone has got to be here. Should I call out and say, hello, I'm here? But he thinks, I'm not going to buy a mirror. I'm walking around. These are big mirrors. He said, I'm not going to bother anybody. But he walks into the shop and what he sees is everything he sees. He doesn't know if it's real or if it's a reflection of something else that he sees, because he sees in a mirror something reflected in a mirror and reflected in a mirror and reflected in a mirror. So he thinks, I've got to come up close to these mirrors and see what I can see. And he's walking through the shop and he sees this one mirror that just totally captures him. It's a mirror made of bronze, and the bronze is polished so beautifully and so finely that you can actually see a reflection. And the mirror maker must have known this mirror was special because she shined a light on it. And in that light, he could see, it magnified what you saw. You could see more. And as he's standing there looking at the mirror starts to talk to him. And he starts to interact with the mirror. And while he's interacting with the mirror maker comes up behind him and says, oh, I see you found something you like. What is it you like about this mirror? And Mo, the name of the character in the book, says to her, this is the most beautiful mirror I've ever seen. And in fact, it's talking to me. She says, what is it saying? Why do you think it's beautiful? What is it saying to you? And he said, oh, I don't know. It's just telling me I'm safe here and I can be okay and I can talk with you and I can do this stuff. And she says, so tell me, what does the mirror see when it looks at you? And he tells her what he sees when he looks into the mirror. He tells her all his stories. He tells him who he is. He tells him he sees himself in a new way. And she says, I'm sorry, you misunderstood my question. I'm not asking what you see when you look in the mirror. I'm asking, what does the mirror see when it looks at you? It doesn't know any of your stories. What do you see? What does it see you are without all your stories? And Mo says, I don't know that. I can't. I don't know that I've ever thought about that. I mean, who are we if we're not our stories? And she said, that's good. Just sit with it now for a little bit and see if you can figure out what the mirror sees when it looks at you without your stories. Interesting contemplation, right? What do we see? What does the world see when it looks at us? What's the world that we could see if we were out of our own way without our stories?
It's funny. I just was thinking in my first book, I wrote a story about Jan the Mirror Maker.
Oh, wow.
I had to think about that.
Of course you did. I was like, wow, we got a little mirror theme going on in our... Yeah. We have very similar philosophies towards our writing as well.
I love it.
I do. When I read how you approached it and then you just spoke about it, is I see that if one writes prescriptive, you basically take the agency away from the other person to figure out what it means for them and then allow them to build their own foundation of understanding. Yeah. And I think it goes a little bit back to this similar topic that you went to earlier, is that if we're trying to teach them something, then it's still us, the teacher, and they think they understand it because they're really focusing on the learning part, but the learning part is not the understanding part. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that the 5 steps to a greater life is often easier to sell because it appeals to the need to control and to have a sense of I can do this. Yeah. Where the spacious in the words, it actually allows the person to take more and more meaning and understand themselves as they read a book. And yet they might not be able to tell you what they took away from the book. It's more of it's the vibration. It's the implicit way of being in the world that they say, wow, there's something in here. I'm sensing how it is to live and be like that. So
if you are a good storyteller, people will get the story as well. So they'll be able to tell you back what the story is, but the story that they'll tell you back isn't the story you necessarily wrote.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of a story. The story is, as soon as I tell the story, just like you did, oh, I have Juan, the mirror maker, or whatever the name of it was, right? And you immediately went to something in your life that resonated with you around what you created, and we share a mirror theme. So the question for me, which I would like to pose to people, is how do we really listen? Like, what does it take to take a screaming child in the midst of rage and just be able to slow it down enough to connect with them, to say, I just want to hear you. You know I want to hear you. I'm not trying not to hear you. How do we get political parties to sit and actually listen to each other? How do we get prisons to listen to prisoners? Because they're acting out. If you follow my daughter's example, speak, yell, tantrum, attack. Prisons are filled with people that haven't been listened to, right? It's just such a simple way of seeing the world. And if we would have been able to listen to them, they wouldn't have need to commit the crime. They don't. When you're listened to, you don't need to yell, you don't need to tantrum, you don't need to attack.
Yeah.
It's just the frustration of what happens when people don't feel heard. So the Mosaic gave me this mission to listen to those no one listens to and speak to those that no one speaks to. And I thought, when it came to me, I thought, boy, you must really be suffering here, because look how much I talk. Like, look, even in this conversation, look how much I'm talking. I'm the worst listener in the whole world. I'm talking so much. And it answered me, which was really beautiful. It said, Danny, we want you to do this not because you're good at it. We want you to do this so you can learn it. And if you do it, you'll learn it. But the other thing is, make no mistake about it, there's something that happens in your conversation that you're not even aware of, and we want you to be very aware of it. Mm. When you speak, your stories are interesting enough that you occupy the minds of people.
Yeah.
And the mind is where fear comes from. So if you can occupy the mind and alleviate the fear that they feel by just engaging it in stories, then the real work you have to do is listen to the hearts of the people you're talking to. Touch them with your heart. Listen to the soul of people you're talking to. Touch them with your soul. And it will be uninterrupted because the mind will be engaged in the stories that you do. So part of the process that I would love to initiate in this revolution of listening is that it isn't only listening with the ears. We can listen with the ears, but do we hear anything? It's when we listen to the heart and the soul of another human being. Again, in my book, there's another very, very beautiful character. They're simple characters. She's a waitress. And when Mo walks into the restaurant, he's invited by a monk. A monk unzips the sky and walks him into a parallel reality. And the first place he gets to is a restaurant. He thinks, this is really weird. Why would I go to a restaurant in the midst of in a parallel reality? And he realizes he's super hungry. He hasn't eaten in days, and he's manifested that restaurant. And the restaurant is packed, and he thinks, oh, this is a good sign. At least it's packed. People seem to like the food. And when he orders, it comes in a moment to him later, and the waitress looks at him and he says, boy, this food is magnificent. Why is this food so good? She said, well, it's really interesting. At this place, we listen to what you want. And we deliver to you what you want. You tell us the food you want and we give it to you. But we also take time to figure out what you need. And we don't only give you what you want. We give you what you need. In conversation, how often do we listen to what a person really needs in that space behind their words? When we can occupy the mind and get the mind engaged, we can actually hear what the heart and soul needs. And conversation then becomes, as you started out the show, conversation now becomes not only the words that we say, which are really valuable. Don't get me wrong. I think the words we use are incredibly important. But the vibration that we exchange with each other is also incredibly valuable and important. And in that vibration, that's where transformation happens. That's where people feel, when you get people to feel different, not because you're trying to make them feel different, but just by your presence, people feel something they haven't felt before, or they haven't felt for a while. They forgot they could feel like that. That's when impact really happens. Not because you want them to be like you, because you want them to be like them.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm putting you guys under a spell or something. You're like very quiet. You started out very, 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 very vivacious, and now I got you all like, oh,
You know,
what am I gonna do now? The guy who's
we're good at interrupting. So I think what tends to happen with, at least for me, when you speak, either there's something that feels off, and then I say, what is it there that I don't quite connect with? And then I try to ask a question, or I'll say, oh, there's something else I haven't experienced with. And then I'll try to maybe create a meta understanding based on the fact that we've discussed it more on the program. Mm. So neither of those are active at the moment.
Mm. So I'm neither interesting nor relatable, is what you're saying.
No. I would say how I've expressed everything you've said is very much how I live, engage, discuss. So asking you a question would be like asking me a question.
Yeah. So ask yourself a question. Let's hear what that would be.
I had a great question yesterday, which wasn't an easy question, which is nice because I tend to find the questions are easier once you've done a lot of inquiry. What's the boundary between a responsibility one has to be open to another when the other's behavior or is intolerance?
So is that the question you're asking me now?
I'd love to have that interaction with you. Yeah.
I would love to engage with you. When I was in the monastery, and I spent 10 years in a monastery, we were monks, and the object of being a monk was to do whatever you were asked to do, what needed to be done. Yeah. And so we found on numerous occasions people were asking us to do things, and we just didn't have time in the day to do everything that we were being asked to do. Mm-hmm. So I went to the head of our monastery, and I said to him, I'm having a conflict here, because like I really want to be there and available for people, but if I don't have enough time in the day to practice our practice that I have to do, and also to be there for them, and also to just like, I'll be pulled out in so many different ways that I won't be able to do anything really well. And so I'm finding that I'm having to say no to people, and that's not in the precepts of what we're doing as monks. Mm-hmm. We don't want to say no to people. He said something really beautiful to me. He said, always say yes in your heart. Always hold space in your heart to do that. Mm. Sometimes you just have to say no with your mouth.
Nice.
And that place is such, I don't know if that relates, but when you asked it to me, it immediately related to me, because what happens for me in interactions with people is there is this beautiful space of agendaless conversation where I have no agenda of how I feel you have to be. Mm-hmm. But I just hold the space for you to be whoever you want to be. And in that space, what I found, when I hold the space that the only thing I want to do in that conversation is love and accept you, listen to you and hear you, and acknowledge what you said and validate what you said as being what you did say. What I found is when people feel that, over the course of time, everything that they are not falls away. And everything they are emerges, because all the armor that they put up of trying to convince you that this is what you have to believe or think or feel. I'm 65 years old. Never in my life has somebody said, I need you to believe like me. When they felt loved and accepted, listened to and heard, acknowledged and validated. They understood that I thought what I thought. And they, even if they couldn't accept me, they were okay with it, because like if they were going to blow up a building, it wasn't going to be mine, because they at least felt listened to. They at least felt loved, right? They at least felt accepted. And we found a way to engage with each other in the way we could engage with each other. Now, not everybody's going to be your best friend. Not everybody's going to be somebody you want to spend all your time with. You have the right to choose who you want to spend time with, and I have the right to choose who I want to spend time with. And if somebody is angry and confused, the medicine of our love heals. And what I saw in COVID is that if a little invisible virus that is contagious as all get out could scare the world into a complete halt. I mean, complete halt. The world shut down. Every place in the world shut down. It gave me hope, because there's also an invisible virus of love that we want to become as contagious as possible. And the more contagious that becomes, the more it affects people. And if a virus that's invisible could fill people with fear, imagine what the virus of love could do. Imagine if we become super connectors of viruses of love. That everywhere we go, people are infected with the love that we feel. Completely infected, so much so that it changes our life. What type of world would we live in then? That virus exists. And if we just listen for it and hear it, it will change even those people that are angry and afraid, and it might not change them in the minute you're with them. Who cares? It's not about getting points on your scorecard of how many people you converted. It's not about converting anybody. It's about this agendalessness that we bring into our life that says, brother, I love you just because you're you. You don't have to be anything for me.
So I got that. Now Hitler comes along.
Yeah.
That's the question I'm wondering.
Yeah.
What is the criteria or the point when you say, okay, this came from, I need to stay in dialogue, because it's in dialogue and love that in time people will see themselves and then me. And now I have this other thing that has the potential to wreak havoc on its surroundings. And then that was more of my question. When does that become the call to action, and what's the criteria? Because I can't say I have a criteria right now.
So I love that question, and I can't say that I have it either, but I'm going to give you my hint.
Yeah.
Okay. And I love when a conversation comes full circle, because this is the beauty of having a child that communicates without communicating.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the theory: speak, yell, tantrum, attack. That goes for you and me. It goes for me with my wife. It goes for people in office buildings. It goes for people who lead countries. It goes for dictators who mass murder millions and millions of people.
Yeah.
There is something in somebody who, when they are not heard, they attack. And if you take that simple principle learned by a person who the world says can't communicate, and apply it to the world that does communicate, when people feel loved and accepted, listened to and heard, acknowledged and validated, they don't need to act out that way. Now, it might take longer because the habit pattern is longer. When I finished writing the Mosaic, it told me to go out on the road and speak to people nobody speaks to, and listen to people no one listens to. I had every intention of going into white supremacist meetings. I had every intention of going into places where criminals got together. I had every intention of going to the hardest, roughest, toughest areas in the country or around the world, and sitting with those people to see if these theories can become realities. I wanted to go into prisons. I wanted to go everywhere. I don't know yet because COVID came and stopped me from doing it. But I can tell you in the less extreme cases, when people, I watch it, what happens in I've had millions of conversations, maybe not millions, hundreds of thousands with people. And in every single one of them, when people felt loved and accepted, listened to and heard, acknowledged and validated, they stopped screaming, tantruming and attacking. There was just no need for it. So would that work with an Adolf Hitler? Will it work with a Donald Trump? I mean, we have our own sort of fascist regime starting to take over where they're not respecting each other. But even the thought of people saying we are better than you, when someone says we're better than you or we're more than you, or people stand up and fight and they scream louder.
Yeah.
We have to figure out, how do we come together? How do we come together with those people in our... Let me try and share this point. As a monk in a monastery, I loved my brothers that I was there with. It was some of the most beautiful moments of my life. And one day there was admitted into the monastery a guy who was a complete pain in the ass to everybody that was in there. It took a happy, fun-loving, gentle group of people and created mass pandemonium.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people hated this guy, and he would just push every single button that everybody could have. And a bunch of us went to our
former.
Okay. But a bunch of us went to our teacher and we said, hey, why did you let this guy in here? And he said, what's going on? What's the problem? And he said, we told him we were so peaceful and happy and we worked together so beautifully. And this guy came in and now we're all at each other's throats. And he said, boy, am I happy to hear that. Because had he not come, I would have needed to go out and hire somebody to do that for you. Because he's going to teach you more than anything that you're sitting in your silence is teaching you. Mm-hmm. You can't be these people here and then have somebody come into your life and have that change you to become this type of person. Mm-hmm. So that person is your guru right now. You watch yourself, you learn. And it wasn't easy. But over the course of a few weeks, a few months for some people, maybe a year for other people, suddenly that brother was one of our brothers. Mm-hmm. And we loved that brother. And not only did we change, he changed.
Yeah.
Everybody changed. It wasn't that we all of a sudden were open-hearted and said, okay, we're going to let this asshole, just be whoever he is. He became not an asshole because he was accepted and loved.
Yeah.
What my daughter taught me through her lack of ability to speak is something I really, really think the world needs to hear. And it was what created the revolution of listening that I'm trying to bring out. I feel like I'm talking too much, but I have two stories still I want to share with you. Can I share two stories?
Please, go ahead.
The second step that pushed me into this place of listening was when I wrote the Mosaic. It was basically a fableized story of my life. I based the characters on people that I'd met in real life. The story is a beautiful story. If people read it, it will literally touch your heart and soul. But as I was writing it, I thought it would take me 6 weeks, 2 months to write, because I'd written a story for a hotel to brand the hotel, and there was a major hotel, and it took me 4 weeks to do that. So I thought, this is my story. It should be easy to write. 3 years later, I was sitting with this book and it wouldn't finish. And I got so frustrated. I was waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning writing, and I would find at 8 o'clock in the morning, my file was gone. My computer would get corrupted. I lost everything on my computers many times, except the one thing, and I got it all back except for the story that I'd written. And so I finally said to the characters, they weren't real. They were characters that I made up based on real people, but I didn't talk to the real people. I said to the characters in my book, what in the hell is going on here? Why won't you let me finish this book? Like, what are you doing? And they appeared almost like in a Zoom call to me. And they each said to me over time the same exact thing. They said, you're telling us to say things that we don't want to say. We won't say that. We can't let you write that as our words. And I said, with all due respect, guys, I made you up. You're my characters. I should be able to tell you what I want you to say, and you shouldn't stand here and oppose that. And they said, but that's not true. As soon as you made us up, we became real. And as the reality that we exist in, and whatever reality that is, we want you to listen to what we're saying. If you listen to what we're saying, your book will be done in 30 days. If you don't, you'll be in here 5 more years and you still won't be done. So I said, okay, I surrender, I give up. What happened when I listened to them is they infused me with a gentleness that I didn't know. They infused me with a kindness that I didn't have. They infused me with a simplicity that wasn't in me before. And I believe that's why the book is touching so many people. So if characters that I made up can become real enough to speak to me and tell me that what I'm saying is not what they want to say, what characters in your life have you made up? What people that exist in your life are you giving the soliloquy of what they're saying to yourself is? What would happen if you got out of your own way and listened to the people around you? What would happen for you? What would you hear? I can tell you from my life, it's completely changed as a result of that listening. And there's a third story then. In my desire to listen to people, I became very empathetic. And I started to hear and feel people more than their words were saying. And one day I was walking in my hometown of San Diego, downtown. And as people passed by me, I could feel them. I felt, well, this woman was coming towards me and my heart started to beat really quickly and agitated and really, and it was like, oh my God, like I could be having a heart attack. And 20 seconds after she passed me, the feeling was gone. 2 minutes later, a guy was putting all his weight onto a cane and walking in pain in front of me. And my legs buckled out, my knees buckled out, and I fell to the ground. 15 seconds later, he passed me and the pain was gone and I could get up. And I thought, whoa, I do not like this at all. This is not something that I want. And I went to the side of the pavement, so where the buildings met the pavement. And sitting there was a homeless guy by the name of Corey. And when I came up, he said, no, this is my space. You can't come here. This is my space. I own this space. This is where I have my profession. You don't come here. Please leave me alone. And I said, I'm sorry, my friend. As painful as your life is, it's a joy to sit with you, and I want to just be with you. What would it take to sit here with you? He said, well, if you sit here, I won't make any money because people will see we're talking and I need to make money. And I said, how much money do you make in a half an hour? He said, $5. I make $5 every half an hour. So I put my hand in my wallet and I said, here's $50. We're covered for half an hour. He said, okay, you're a weirdo. Come, you can stay here, I guess, a little bit. It took him a while to open up to me. But my question was, Corey, you have the opportunity to see all these people pass by you every single day, sometimes many times a day. If you could stop them, what would you say to them? And he said, Danny, you've told me a lot of stories. Let me tell you a story. I hate being homeless. It's an embarrassment. I'm ashamed of it. I hate it. But what makes it even worse is people treat me like a thing. They don't even treat me like an animal. They treat me like a thing. A few months ago, some boys came by and just beat the shit out of me. Another day, somebody came and took all my money. People walk by and they spit at me or yell at me or say things to me all the time, thinking that I'm that I don't hear it, or I'm just a thing that they can take advantage of. One day I was sleeping here and someone started urinating on me. And another day someone took a bag of human defecation and threw it at me. Finally, I said, enough's enough. If I hate this life that I'm living in, people hate me, I'm just going to take my life. I'm going to go around the corner. Danny, you don't know this, but the street behind us is barren and empty. Nobody goes on. It gets dark at night. And I said, when it gets dark in the evening, I'm going to go to that street and I'm going to take my life. Not 2 minutes after I had that thought, a man in a three-piece suit came up to me and put his hand on my shoulder and said, how are you doing, brother? And he said, no, you don't want any of this. You just keep going, sir. I'm not doing good. This is not a good day. Don't come and talk to me. I'm not interested. Just leave me alone. I'm not having a good day. And instead of leaving, the man sat down next to me and said, tell me everything. He put his arm around me, and all suddenly I realized this man in a three-piece suit was caring enough about me, this homeless guy who stunk and had clothes beaten up, whose cardboard box was torn. And I just started crying in his arms. I don't know why I was crying. I just started crying. And the man said, that's okay. Just let it all come out. Tell me what's going on. He said, Danny, it only took 10 minutes. He didn't try and change me. He didn't try and fix me. He didn't try and help me. He just was open and said, tell me who you are and tell me what's going on. And he just listened to me. He doesn't know it, but that day he saved my life. I couldn't kill myself that day because someone in a three-piece suit that was important took 10 minutes to sit with somebody like myself who was about to take my life. I wish he would have come back and I could have told him that day he saved my life. But that's what I would say to the people if I could talk to them. You have no idea how much 10 minutes of just being with somebody and listening to somebody can change their life. Well, there's something called the butterfly effect. When I heard that story from Corey, it changed me. And I said, I can do that. I'm going to tell Corey's story to everybody I meet. And so on every show that I'm on every presentation that I go, and every boardroom that I go into, and every lecture that I give, I tell Corey's story. And now there are hundreds of thousands of people, maybe even millions of people that have heard that story. And I follow it up with this challenge. If you could take 10 minutes out of the course of your life to just listen to somebody, 10 minutes out of the course of a lifetime is not a lot. To just go up to someone and say, how are you? You have no idea the impact that might have on their life. It just might save their life. It might make them feel loved and accepted for the first time in the world they've ever had. So go up to someone you don't know, either virtually or in real time, and practice that practice. My life has been a constant mosaic of my daughter helping me to listen. The book that I wrote, telling me that what I was saying wasn't as important as what it wanted me to hear. And a homeless man on a street corner in San Diego, telling me the power of what happens when we just listen to each other and not try and change or fix or convert or uplift or do anything, but just listen to each other. If I can inspire one person through this show to just listen to somebody else, I'll feel like the revolution is off to a good start.
Beautiful. We've gone over our hour.
I see that.
We've got a few comments in though from Bolalang, who's in South Africa, who joins us each day. Is there something in there that looks like it'd be nice to bring on? Is there a way that the world is? I think we all make it in our minds, and we can only try to see how others see it. Interesting. Yeah, that was to a comment you made earlier.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into too much detail on it, but in a way, there is the idea that there is an absolute, and in saying it the way it is, as opposed to the way one perceives. So I guess a bowl along is very sensitive to language that can have a belief system behind it. So,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah. I don't subscribe to an absolute reality.
yeah,
But I also don't prescribe that the way we see the world is an absolute reality.
yeah, clearly, yeah.
So all I'm asking people to do is not see necessarily the absolute reality that exists, but to actually see the world slightly different than they've seen it right now.
Yeah. And then it says, I love that type of communication where people feel what has not been said. Yeah.
Yeah.
I find that to be far more interesting, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And then he loves your stories, bowl along.
Thank you, all along. Thank you, all along.
And the monk that knew all the buttons and others. Yes. I always say that when I take on a client, I usually spend the first 3 to 6 months just teasing them and taking every area that they react to and heightening their consciousness around the trigger, because without that consciousness, they don't have the ability to break a pattern. So the best way to do it is break it in a loving space where you can trigger it, and then they can say, "Oh, that's what happens to me when I'm triggered." So that's speaking to the irritant of that person who joined you with the monks. Yeah. I can say that the journey that you've taken is not all that dissimilar from my own, in the sense that I'm sure, Bambos, as you're listening, you're kind of laughing, just thinking, oh, this is where it appears that Andy's ended up in the same place with the last letter. The last letter.
A little bit older and wiser version.
Yeah. The last letter, basically, I wrote that book, and that book spoke to me. And I did this tour through the US and sat with 60 groups, only asking them to write a letter to a person as if it were the last letter they were going to write them. That they had the opportunity to feel. And that was 60 groups of people I didn't know. So it was just holding space for love and nothing else, with no ulterior agenda. And that was some of the most powerful work I had ever done up until that point. And the second book was far more taking from there, that I saw a prerequisite to feeling the listening that you're speaking about. For me, has been softening the noise of self-judgment, self-criticism, and all those things that stop us. Because if those exist, what I see is that we can no longer listen, because our filter is all the things that we're judging in ourselves, which is never really a clean filter to look through.
I love that. And so take the Elisa principle. Speak, yell, tantrum, attack. And don't only apply it out of ourselves. Apply it also to what the voices we're hearing inside. Because those same actions is what we do to ourselves. When we speak to ourselves and we don't listen, we yell. When we yell and we don't listen, we create pain and havoc and disagreement and chaos. And when that chaos doesn't work, we create disease and illness, and we attack ourselves and die.
Yeah.
And so if we could also learn to listen, probably most important thing comes out after the show is over, or we've overstayed our welcome. If we could first learn to listen to ourselves and get to that space where we allow ourselves to be empty to hear, then the space we can hold for people. When we say we hold space for you, space is empty. We hold emptiness for you to be yourself. When we come and hold space for somebody, we fill it up with who we are and think most people fill it up with the space of who I am. Who I am holds this for you to be who you are. There's no space left.
Yeah.
It's like the Zen monk who pours tea in the cup and it overflows and goes onto the floor. There's nothing left to go in to the student who comes to learn Zen.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to get to the place where we're comfortable being empty in ourselves so we can hear. So the noise of our life quiets. And in that quiet, we hear the sound of a voice that we never heard before.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us.
What an honor. And we don't know each other from Adam or Eve.
Yeah.
Right. And the fact that we can come onto a conversation not knowing each other and walk away as if you guys are brothers of mine that I never knew, who think and feel so similarly to the way I think and feel. What does that tell us about the world of strangers that we live in? We're not strangers at all.
No.
We're all connected. We're all so much more than what we think we are. We're connected so much deeper than all these superficial things that make us feel like we're different. Thank you for the honor of being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being with us. It was beautiful. And Bolalong says he loves the description of holding space. I've never heard it this way before. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you, Bolalong.
And Bolalong, I wrote a lot about it in my book, so obviously I have to improve something there. We have a lot of fun with Bolalong. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really great being with you.
God bless. Thank you, guys.
Bye. Hey.
I think that was one of the most meditative shows we've had.
Yeah. It sort of feels like I'm talking to myself, right?
Yeah, but he also has a very calming voice.
Uh-huh.
Like
you want to get like Coco and sit under the covers and listen to him as he speaks. That's nice. That's great. Yeah, it was really fun to hear it, and also just to see. I kind of, when I would listen to someone, I've never had, I think, anyone on who I've seen has such a similar journey to that of my own, where there's so many overlaps, which we didn't even get into on the show, but from, even talking about the mirror maker cracks me up in the book itself. But there's so many overlaps, and how the books have guided me to what they asked me to do, as opposed to writing books with the intention beforehand, and having that as this sort of evolution is really, it's just beautiful to be and say, I'm often telling you what is the thing that I do now that I had never done before, is that I see everything through the filter of love, and the words that come out of your mouth are immediately different. And if that doesn't exist, then I see there's something I have to look into myself to figure out what's going on, because it's not coming out clean. I can hear there's a contradiction, or it doesn't make sense. And that's all I heard him speaking from, is basically, if it isn't through the filter of love, then you're actually not really communicating the essence of what's really inside of you. You're still holding it back for whatever reasons. Yeah. And for you?
I just feel a lot of love right now.
Yeah, beautiful. Great. Well, we've got 2 more shows before we go on hiatus. Is that right, Bambos?
Yeah.
And
what do we have tomorrow?
I don't know who we have tomorrow. Who do we have? Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, creeping this petty pace from day to day.
I don't belong here.
Oh, we're going to talk to Yuka, who's a dear friend of our other dear friend on the show, Chris Gorell. They're partners, and so we're going to talk to her.
That's his wife?
No, partners in crime for work, not in the emotional, not in the sexual, as far as I know. We'll find that out tomorrow, though.
Yeah, and Friday, guys, we are going to end our season by sharing our best shows and just talking about them.
And I wouldn't call them our best shows.
Best moments.
The moments that touched us, or the moments that impacted us on the show. You know why I don't want to call it the best shows?
Because there is no best show.
No. Because I was going through the shows today, there's so many moments, and as soon as I call them the best shows, I offend everybody else who wasn't on one of those shows. So I'd rather stay with the moments that touched me in the 150 shows.
Well, the funny thing is, I was like, I'm not going to sit and watch 150 shows, so I'm just randomly clicking. Yes. And the funny thing is, every show is actually the same in a way, because we touch upon the same subject but a different context.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter anymore.
In some ways it doesn't, but in other ways that I do have, I'm not going to go into it, but I have found a consistency in the shows that you're right, that at least I've connected to more than other shows. So we'll talk about that as well.
And we're going to do that, Andy, on
A Wonderful K. Oh, sir.